Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I'm actually filling in for Mauricio, who's out this week. He's in beautiful Sedona with some. Oh, we got some fun people joining. With some fun people. He will be back next week, and he's going to be talking about social media advertising and how to legally advertise your deal and raise money on social media. So you're definitely going to want to join for that one. But tonight, I'm super excited because we are here with the lovely and brilliant Ashley Wilson of Bar Down Investments. And we're going to talk tonight about asset management. And Ashley, I know that this has been kind of a hot topic. Thank you so much for joining us because I'm super excited to talk with you. Of course, I always love to talk to you anyway. But
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I want to have a couple of questions, and we're going to open it up, of course, to Q&A as well. But I know there are a couple of hot topics that have been sort of milling about, and so we'll go over those. And Ashley, you run a group called Apartment Addicts. Do you want to take just a second and tell us about that, though, because that is just an amazing program.
Yeah, so my partner and I, my partner's actually on the call tonight too, Jay Scott. He just waves for anyone who doesn't have the mouse over his screen, but he and I started last May a 12-step program called Apartment Addicts, and it goes through everything you could possibly need in terms of transitioning to purchasing or passively investing in large apartments. That is the focus of the program. We don't spend a lot of time on small apartments. While you could take the information and apply it, we really focus on how to structure debt, equity, how to structure partnerships, how to search, define your market, everything you could possibly need. And of course, operate. Obviously, we're known for our operations, asset and construction management. So we pride ourselves within this program of teaching you how to actually operate the property after you purchase it, and not just how to source capital and source deals.
Which is awesome. That's an awesome segue for what we're going to talk about tonight. A couple of things that have been on everyone's mind, I think, and that is COVID. Can we talk just a minute about the COVID rent relief that has been going on? I'm going to ask everybody to please mute yourself as you come on so that we don't hear background noise. We try to do it as we go, but I want to make sure that everybody gets to hear the great content that Ashley is bringing for us. Okay, so just mute yourself when you come on, please. I'm going to have to mute her. Right, how do I do that without, sorry about that. Ashley, I'll let you talk. Ashley, are you able to?
I don't have control.
There you go. No, I just wanted to hear you talk. That's okay. I just want to make sure you can talk. So let's talk a little bit about COVID and rent relief and how is that being handled right now in transactions?
So COVID obviously posed a lot of challenges for landlords across the country with respect to collecting rents and then being able to keep the lights on, so to speak. So everything from being able to continue to pay your debt on a property to your general maintenance expenses, it really was impacted due to the stress that the tenants have and obviously the trickle up effect. So what happened across the country is a lot of different programs were established, rental relief programs, both at a federal level, a state level, and then local charitable organizations also contributed depending on the different markets. The challenges that happened because of the COVID relief, while obviously being a hugely beneficial program to everyone impacted, the challenge was the infrastructure. Like everything, we were all in a knee-jerk reaction type atmosphere, everything from how to handle the pandemic to how to handle general operations when it came to housing and being able to obviously limit the exposure of the disease and the virus being passed from people to people. So one of the things that was implemented obviously by the CDC, which I'm sure everyone on the call knows, is the eviction moratorium. And the reason the CDC stepped in and implemented the eviction moratorium was to prevent the spread of COVID. The challenge that came into play with the rental assistance is the conditions that were applied with the rental assistance programs, and they varied by program. And they also took a situation where you had to then receive rental relief through the agreement of both the tenant and the landlord committing to certain responsibilities. So, for example, a tenant could not apply for rental relief without the landlord also agreeing to certain principles. For example, they could not charge additional fees, such as late fees, if they were receiving rental assistance. Another caveat was that a tenant couldn't apply 2 different rental reliefs to the same time period. So the landlord was the gatekeeper in monitoring that. I think you can see where I'm going here, which is that not all landlords were set up to be able to track and monitor these different rental assistance payments that were coming in and for different time periods. And because of the lack of infrastructure that was in place between these different programs at the different levels, between the national, federal, and local level, there were not a lot of communication between these programs and tracking. So one of the stipulations of the program was that they could come in and audit you at any given time. Well, because the rental assistance has run out, the pandemic has impacted properties longer than originally anticipated. One way in which they are trying to now go back and see if there is additional assistance that they can provide is by auditing and looking for whether or not tenants and landlords double dip, so to speak. And this has been challenging because this is not happening across the board. So there isn't really any precedent as to how to go about doing it. We invest heavily in the Houston market, and the Houston market is specifically the Houston Apartment Association is the largest apartment association in the entire country. And because of that, a lot of different infrastructure for the NAA, the National Apartment Association, and then the rest of the governing bodies across the country follow the precedent that the HAA sets. Well, the HAA right now is heavily going after trying to figure out how many people were double dipping and figure out a way in which they can recoup some of those stimulus payments that were sent out so they can redistribute them. The challenge with that lies with a couple things. First, of course, is which stimulus gets paid back. So if it was a national stimulus that was applied at the same time as a local, charitable organization or a state level, which one receives the funds back? That's one challenge. Another challenge that not a lot of people are talking about, but is definitely something that I think is going to become more of an issue due to the increase of transactions that are occurring in the marketplace, is who's responsible and who's culpable for the impact of those funds being, somewhat double dipped for recouping that double dip expense. So, for example, if you purchase a property and a tenant that you still have on the property was applying 2 different rental assistance from 3 months prior to your ownership, is it the previous owner's responsibility to take sale proceeds and pay back that extra rental relief that was paid to the property, or now does it become the new ownership's responsibility? And the reason this becomes tricky is when there is a transaction and there are individuals or tenants that are on the rental relief program, there is a transitional document or transfer of ownership document that gets sent in to also vouch that you will abide by these same stipulations that the program has. Unfortunately, there really isn't any clear guidelines yet how these things are going to be handled. There are a lot of different lawyers involved. I've actually been working with the HAA to try to figure out some of the challenges that I see at an a day-to-day operational level, and help them as they try to navigate and give feedback back to the NAA. Because as I said before, a lot of the different actions that we take as apartment owners and within the HAA then get implemented across the country and become kind of standard for the NAA. So I think we'll continue to see this. It's definitely been challenging. I've known, firsthand the benefit of when these programs are used effectively. It can really help your tenant. It can really help your property weather the storm, so to speak. But there are obviously, with every great opportunity in real estate and in life, there are those potential downsides as well that, were not used for the original intention that the program was set up to do.
Great. So, as it relates to COVID and these relief programs and all of that, have you seen a massive shift or change or impact aside from all this? Have you seen a massive change in multifamily, just generally speaking, as a result of COVID?
I have seen a change in COVID because of the impact of COVID. I've seen it, when we look at the economy and we look at the change in terms of the interest rates, how the interest rates have decreased, that comes to a direct impact on the number of transactions that are happening in the marketplace right now. So with the decrease of interest rates, we're seeing a lot of different properties transact because the cost of capital has decreased. And ultimately, everyone's purchasing power is tied to the cost of capital. So if you decrease the largest part of your capital stack, so if you decrease your debt side of your capital stack, you in essence are increasing your ability to pay more for a property. That has led to compression of cap rates. Another component that has led to compression of cap rates is I think that there is a lot of foreign capital coming into the market that has historically, but at a whole nother level that we haven't seen previously. My husband is Canadian, so I'm very lucky to be able to have that visibility into the Canadian market. And in Western Canada, they have actually implemented several different deterrences by means of implementing foreign investor tax tariff on foreign investors investing in Canada, especially when they don't reside in the properties in which they're purchasing. We don't have that deterrence in the US. Whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is that foreign capital, foreign investors are also coming in, because if you believe that we are in an inflationary period, and if you believe that foreign capital can be invested and go further today than it was able to go 2 years ago, it's definitely makes sense for someone to come in and start investing in the US market. So I think that has been a change that I've seen because of COVID. And when I look at all of these transactions happening because of compression of cap rates, then we get into another component that I'm seeing happening, which is, where is all this money going? So if everyone is selling, where are they then placing their capital? There's a lot of idle capital, and idle capital then ends up turning into either 1031 exchanges, and 1031 exchanges, what firsthand, I spoke with an investor who said that he was willing to overpay by $2 million, up to $2 million on a property, because otherwise he would have to have a $3 million tax hit. So when you have people who have that kind of mindset, that need to place capital and they're willing to overpay, that also is impacting the transactions. We had the highest amount of transactions in Q4 of 2021 than we've ever had in any previous Q4 because of the compression of cap rates. So people didn't have to fully execute their business plan to be able to get out on great yields because of those compressions. That was tied in large part because of the low interest rates, but I don't think we should ignore the other factors that have come into play. For example, foreign investor capital and 1031 exchanges.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, we've actually seen a lot of that too in our practice. We've seen a lot more 1031 action. Although we have a few CPAs that'll try to push people just to take bonus depreciation instead, feeling like they get almost as good, if not as good of a benefit by doing that without sort of the regulatory nightmare that is 1031. But I'm not a tax advisor, so I can't really speak to that other than it is a nightmare to manage. But the other thing we've seen a big uptick in is funds. So people had their cash kind of idle for a little while during COVID. I think they figured out that the world wasn't going to end, and then they started just kind of getting cash sort of on standby for these deals. But I'm glad that you guys have seen an uptick in transactions for sure, because I know a lot of folks were trying to just catch up for a few months of lost time from the beginning of COVID. Another trend that I've been seeing, Ashley, is I've been seeing a lot of folks moving towards the build to rent model. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that might be impacting or is impacting the multifamily landscape right now?
Build to rent is a really interesting concept. I think a lot of people are going into this space for several reasons. One is because of the cost of development. They are coupling the build to rent model with innovative ways in which they can develop single family homes or duplexes or smaller multis. It's an interesting model because you can develop it through 3D printing. I've seen two companies that are already executing 3D printing of the BTR model. But the other component that makes it very interesting is it speaks to the housing affordability component. So in terms of accessing different grants and playing off of tax advantages in terms of offsetting that expense on the model, it's making it very advantageous for people to come into this space. Where I think that there will be challenges long-term is when you look at the ability to subdivide the land in which the BTR model is built on. Not every BTR property is owned or resides on its own parcel. So because of that, there are challenges because of being able to get the number of units on a particular parcel. Sometimes it has to be a different model, maybe more so like in terms of exit strategies, not able to sell individually each unit. So the upside with the BTR model that a lot of people talk about is the fact that if it doesn't work, it's not long-term sustainable, then you could always sell off unit by unit. But a lot of people are finding that they are unable to put that many homes on certain parcels. So they're trying to do a hybrid. In that situation, I think it might be a little bit challenging to execute, but I do think the opportunity is still there. What makes it interesting when you look at it long term in terms of the competition that the multifamily sector will have when it is looking at the BTR model, I've actually already experienced it firsthand with a different community that did a lease to own. So very similar in the sense that it was single family houses and you could pay the same amounts that you would to rent a unit at an apartment community, but you could have your own single family home. The challenges that I saw firsthand when I saw that on the multifamily side, being a multifamily owner, was that people do enjoy not having residents above them, obviously, or next to them. They like that freedom of having a detached house that they could reside in. The challenge, of course, was that that community didn't have the foresight to also put community amenities in. So we were able to leverage our community, our apartment community, to speak to, well, we have swimming pools and we have gyms and we have a business center and a fitness center and laundry and, all of these different components that you can access on the property and community events that this other property didn't have. I think the BTR model, a lot of people that I've spoken to about the BTR model, they wanted to create, little micro community centers within the housing community, which I think will be beneficial. I also think too, in terms of the BTR model, what is more challenging about it, and this is speaking with an operator's hat on, is, at the end of the day, we can have 12 units under one roof, where in the BTR model, where it's single family houses, you have one roof per dwelling. So in terms of the overall expense, those capital expense items that come up, that might be more challenging long-term for the BTR model to be sustainable. So that's why I think ultimately the point that I made at the beginning of making sure that these units are on individual parcels, so you have the flexibility to exit and sell them off one by one, I think that's going to be a huge upside for someone if they're looking to get into the BTR investment strategy.
Got it. Okay. So if you're looking at syndicators coming in, that are new to this space, and I know everybody gets all kind of hung up on, when they want to have a pretty pitch deck and they want to go tell their investors how awesome this is, and they crunch the numbers and they figure out, what numbers seem to work by whatever means, and then they get all the money in finally, and they feel like, oh, it's over. But really, I mean, that's kind of when all the real work starts, right? Can you just give maybe some advice to newcomers into the space, or even just veterans who need to know, what, when you finish raising that money, what are your top, I guess, tips for people?
It is definitely challenging to even get to closing. So I don't want to discount all the work that people put into finding a property, underwriting properties, even finding a market to start with, and raising capital. That is a lot of work, and it takes a whole team to put together, especially when you're syndicating 100+ units, to finally cross that finish line at closing. But it is also the start of your actual business plan. So your business plan for that investment starts the day, it actually starts before you close if you're smart about it. But in terms of the execution on the property, it starts the day you close. Everything from, changing locks to making sure that you're changing over all of your utilities, and you're making sure that you have access to payment portals. The last thing you want is to transition a property close to the start of a month and have all of the tenants' payments go to the previous owner. So there are a lot of challenges that you have to overcome in the first 30 days of taking over a property. And then, of course, it depends on the type of property that you're acquiring. If you're acquiring a property that is in, cruise control, it is already stabilized, whether that is a new build or, relatively newer construction type property, and it's just cash flowing, maybe you don't have to do much in terms of the heavy lift of repositioning a property. However, if you're looking into going into the value add sector of multifamily, it is extremely challenging in the first 6 months to year of ownership. And it can be even longer depending on how big of a reposition you have to undertake when you get the property. So sometimes it requires cycling out the entire tenant base. Well, the NAA across all asset classes, across all markets in the US, has quoted a 50% renewal. So if you're not able to get tenants out by, if they shouldn't be in there in the first place, if they didn't qualify, or eviction, it might take you a year to cycle them out, because their lease renewals are coming up. And then in terms of repositioning the property, it's very difficult. You have the vision for the property in terms of what you want the property to be like at the end of the day. You might have your color schematic, and you have your security patrol, and you have your gates, and you want to create this safe community and great community for everyone. But people aren't seeing that. They're seeing whatever they see in front of them, and they're also reading reviews online, and maybe those reviews are 6 months old or from previous ownership, but that really stays with the property. So it takes some time to turn around the reputation of a property. It does not happen overnight. If you have a really good team, you can probably do it, depending on the size of the property, within a year to 2 years. But realistically, people like to underwrite around 3 years to reposition a property. So in terms of just the workload that you need to pay attention to, I think at the end of the day, the most important component is your team. You need to have a really strong property management team, a team that has experience doing exactly what your business plan is outlining. And then from a general partnership team, and even to your investors, everyone has to be on board with your game plan, because there are challenges to owning real estate. We all know this. If you have a single family home, if you have, your primary residence, you have challenges all the time just by owning one unit. Extrapolate that over 100 plus across 3 to 5 years, that those challenges become magnified. So just having a strong team goes a long way. I always say to any investor looking to passively invest that people tend to look at returns first, the market second, and the team third. But what they don't realize is they're investing in the actual property. They're investing in the team. The team makes or breaks a deal. And if you have an all-star team can take a mediocre deal and make it amazing, but a mediocre team can make an all-star deal awful. So really spend a lot of time focusing on building your team, whether you are a GP or an LP, it doesn't matter. Vet everyone very thoroughly.
Good. And I think that's good. That's probably good advice for any business, right? I mean, it's always the people that you surround yourself with. And Ashley, I want to open it up for questions here in just a moment. And if anybody wants to put questions in the chat, please feel free to do that, or you can use the raise your hand feature as well if you have questions for Ashley. But I can keep asking questions all night, Ashley. I know you know that. I can just keep talking to you. I know you're part of Bar Down, and you guys have this kick-ass business going on, but you actually have a few things going on. Can you just tell us a little bit about some of the other businesses you have going on?
So we have a coaching program called Apartment Addicts, which we spoke about earlier, which we're really excited about. That's a 12-step program that goes through everything from the fundamentals of multifamily all the way through the operations. As I mentioned, if you were late to join, with respect to Bar Down, we also obviously offer passive investment opportunities for anyone who is looking to diversify and get into multifamily. So we are really excited about those two ventures that we are focused on. Jay and I do a lot of speaking throughout the country on different topics. We have a strong background with asset and construction management, so we tend to focus a lot of our time on developing and building out people who want to focus on those same things as well. So those are really the focal points that we've been spending our energy in over the past few years. I, a few years ago, wrote a book called The Only Woman in the Room, which is a book co-authored by 19 other women in real estate. It is not all about multifamily. It is not everyone at the same level, everyone with the same background. It's all different stories of how those women have gotten to their point in their real estate investing journey. So it's some people who've started late in their life to people who's, started very young. And it covers self-storage and short-term rentals, really every asset class, flipping, house hacking. I mean, you name it, it's in there. So I'm really definitely excited that so many women have responded so well to this book. And then also too, there are a lot of men who really enjoy the book as well, because it's not really focused on being the only woman in the room. It's just really a real estate book. So we're excited about that as well.
Very cool. So you know a little bit about what you're talking about. I just kind of wanted to give people a flavor of who they were listening to here. And Jay, you just came across my panel. I'm in the gallery view, so I just saw Jay pop up on my screen. Hey, Jay. Jefferson Gann has a question for you. Jefferson, if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask yourself, you can.
Yeah. So, so what's your strategy, let's say, to reposition, or let's say you have an apartment that you want to replace the tenant base to a class B, but it's like 100% occupied. How do you approach basically that business plan?
So we do an analysis of our current tenant base to see how many of those tenants can afford. I'm assuming you're replacing them because you're pushing the rents on the property. That's normally the reason why someone would be cycling out a tenant base. And what we do is we do an analysis based off of how many tenants can afford the new rent that we are pushing the units to be. So it depends on how aggressive you want to be on renewals. You can obviously push rents and force vacancy, and you can do it upon every renewal, or you can manage it by seeing what your vacancy exposure is, because ultimately you still need to cover your expenses. So you don't want to be in a situation where you force vacancy to the point where you can't afford to continue to carry the property. The other thing that we do as well is if someone chooses to stay, we can also do add-ons to their unit. So let's say, for example, we say we'll replace your appliances, and for an increase in appliance package, maybe we charge an additional $100 a month by just replacing their appliances. So you can do a hybrid model. The other thing you can do too is all you need is, 1 or 2 units to renovate. And once you have those units renovated, you can offer them as available units to your current tenant base. And you can actually give an incentive for someone to transfer to that unit. So a lot of times people charge a transfer fee when someone moves from one unit to the next. But we actually do the opposite. We offer incentives. We waive the transfer fee. Sometimes we'll even pay for moving expenses to help someone move to that unit, because what that does is that frees up a unit sooner for us to be able to renovate and execute our strategy faster. So we don't always just force vacancy by increasing the rents upon renewal, because we feel that there can be an exposure on your vacancy, which would not allow you to cover all of your expenses.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And TJ has a question for you as well. TJ, if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask.
Thanks for taking my call. I was wondering, what if you have to replace the property management company? What is the best way to do it so that you don't get into confrontation or get into conflict? What's the best way to approach that? If you could comment on that. Thank you.
Great question. So every property management company that you use, that's a third party that you use, has you would have signed a contract, and every single property management company has a different, or should, when you're signing contracts, you should make sure that you have a section where it speaks to termination, and it outlines who initiates the termination and what that implies. It depends by property management companies. Sometimes it can be 30 days, sometimes it can be 2 weeks. And the reason why this is important is obviously it's important because that also speaks to the challenges that could arise during that transitional period. The one tip that I would definitely give is when you've identified another property management company that you are going to replace your current property management company with, that they are in communication right away. Typically, property management companies are very cordial to each other. They all have a working relationship within within that market. So in terms of the animosity and challenges, it normally only comes into play when the ownership group gets involved. So just like you utilize a lawyer to handle your negotiations for you, because sometimes you can get emotional about a situation and lawyers can see it with a clearer head. And the communication between lawyers, there's just a general acceptance that you're going to be doing business together probably again. So there's a mutual respect. Property management companies have that mutual respect at play when there are transitions. So I would highly recommend that you really let the new property management company that is taking over handle the transition. I'm not saying to not monitor it and not be involved, but not be involved intimately. Allow that other property management company to step in and help with the transition, get the appropriate documents they need, make sure that all the systems are transferred over correctly. There is typically a transfer document between property management companies, and it happens more frequently than you'd probably think. So a lot of these property management companies have already gone through it on both ends of the spectrum. So they're very well versed, and they probably have already gone through it with a property management company that you're using already. So there's already that kind of rapport between the two groups.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Do you have time for a couple more questions?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So Bob Ju has a question. Bob, you can unmute yourself if you want.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ashley. Just curious, because you mentioned foreign investment, and I am actually getting quite a few inquiries about foreign investment from foreign investors. But the concern is that there's actually seemingly quite high tax that's applicable to foreign property investors in the US. But you mentioned that Canada has even a stronger deterrent. So that's interesting. And also, do you see that despite of the US Tax Act, there is still increasing interest from foreign investors in US properties?
Great questions. With respect to the first question, the Canada tax limit, there are different, it depends on the province, but there are different taxes placed. One tax, I believe it's in BC, is 15% tax. Don't quote me on this, but I believe it was 15%
Right.
tax for foreign investors investing in I don't know how it's worded, but basically an investment property that one does not reside in. So there was that tax on top of all of the other taxes they have to pay, just being investors. So it was just because they're a foreign investor not living in the investment property. So that is one tax that's implemented on the within the US. I have not seen that same level of tax implemented. I'm not a CPA. I'm not, obviously check with your CPA, but when I have consulted with our CPA on foreign investors investing through syndications with us, we have not had any tax implication to that level that Canada has put onto
Sure.
the properties in that province. So that is what I've seen. Obviously things can change, but that has historically been what I have witnessed. With respect to your question on foreign investors continuing to come into the US, I think now more than ever, it's a great time to diversify your investment strategy by currency. And because of that, I think that there is a lot of foreign capital coming into the US. My in-laws are obviously Canadian. As I mentioned, my husband's Canadian. And their dollar today can go much further than it has historically in a very long time. I think the last time it was at this exchange was when we were in college. So a lot of Canadians who already, have or frequent the US in Phoenix and Florida during the winter months, they're purchasing more than they have previously because their dollar is going further. It's not still, above the US dollar, but in terms of purchasing power, they're being able to get a better return than they have historically. So that's something that I think we'll continue to see. And I don't only see that with US. A lot of foreign capital that has been contacting us recently has been coming from Europe and the Middle East. So we've had, and even Asia, we've had different investment groups contact us than we've had historically.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Bob. And I know Frank Brown had mentioned something about blocker entities, and some people do use that strategy to create limited partnerships, depending on where they're coming from, to create a U.S. based entity for investments. But that's something to talk to your tax advisor about. So if anybody has questions about that, you definitely check with your tax advisor. Masood, you have a question. Welcome back this week. It's good to see you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So I am in a very confused situation right now. My question is that I am looking at a property right now which needs quite a bit of a rehab. And the thing is that people are advising me that I might as well dial in my rehab costs as in a bridge loan, because the capital is much cheaper due to the historical low rates. Whereas personally, I do believe that I should get the hang of the property a little bit just to know what things do, how well can a property perform, and how much can I get if the property is able to afford its own rehab. So what should I do in this situation?
Wow. Okay. So I think there's more information that I would need to know to answer the question appropriately. So I would just kind of walk through my thinking of it, and you take it and try to apply it depending on the situation. Typically, when you look at properties that have a huge capital expense required, the reason why people typically go with the bridge loan is because it comes down once again to your cost of capital. And the cheaper you can get, your cost of capital translates to a higher purchasing power. So if you can offset your renovation by having it sourced through a construction line, or supplemental loan, that is obviously a lot cheaper than having it come through equity or through private investors. So just at the very basic level, private investors, maybe they expect a return of, let's say, 14%, or let's say maybe you can get a construction loan at 4.5% to 5%. So you're already winning just by having that sourced through a cheaper provider. When it comes to whether or not you should acquire a property and wait to see how the operation goes to see what it needs, I am from the conservative school. So there might be people who completely disagree with me, which is why, everyone operates properties differently. But I am a firm believer that it's better to have the capital ready to be deployed and not need it than the other way around. The last thing you want to get yourself into is a situation where you don't have the capital, or you need to do a capital call, or the property gets foreclosed on. So really, I think it is more beneficial to be in a situation where you have that opportunity. And at the very least, let's say the property doesn't need that capital expense paid for, then you can maybe refi out of that loan into an agency loan which has better debt terms. But I would suggest that you have a very good construction management team that knows your business plan. So there is a difference on how you would execute a capital X plan if you are holding 3 years versus if you're holding 10 years. There are different projects you tackle, and those projects are tackled differently in terms of how long they need to last for. So I would have a really good team around you, all the way from your property management team to your construction team. And then in terms of a general partnership, I'm just going to say this. A lot of people may dislike me for saying this. I've said it from the very beginning. Every single general partnership team, every single one should have someone on the team who is well-versed in construction. Every single one. I spoke earlier today, and I said it before, and I'll say it again. The thing that surprises me the most is I grew up from single family to commercial real estate. And it's shocking to me how challenging it is to get someone as a private investor on single family, like a flip that's maybe a 6 month to 12 month hold, maybe $50,000, but then these syndications where it's 100+ units over a 3 to 5 year hold, people are saying, where do I send the check when there's no one on the team who has construction knowledge? So if you vet a single family investment and you say that person needs to have construction knowledge, you should do the same on the general partnership. So if you don't have someone right now on your team that has construction knowledge, get someone, find someone, because they're worth their weight in gold to have someone on the team to help you navigate and make sure you have those safeguards in place, because it's not something to mess with. And the challenge is on single family, you know, your water heater goes out, it's probably $1,200 between the water heater and the labor. If your water heater goes out on a you know, if it's not individual water heaters, if it's a water heater across your building, it's thousands and thousands of dollars, depending on the size of the water heater and how many units it's servicing. So it's just exponential problems, and it adds up very, very quickly. So that's what, hopefully that helped. But I wish you definitely good luck in trying to figure out that solution.
Thank you so much. That was great. Something that I really needed. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Ashley. I know Mauricio's been doing these for just a couple of weeks now, and it's always about securities law. And so it's a really, I think, probably a nice break for everyone to listen to something other than, you know, securities law. As much fun as it is to listen to Mauricio, I know I know people love to watch Mauricio, but I really appreciate you taking the time to impart some of your wisdom onto everybody who took the time to join us tonight. If anybody has any other questions, please put them in the chat. For anybody who was late, I'm Bethany LaFlamme. I'm Mauricio's Premier Law Group's managing partner. I'm filling in for Mauricio this week while he's out. He will be back next week, and he's going to be talking about how do you use social media to raise capital and how can you legally advertise on social media. So it's a question that I spend a lot of my workday answering. So I think a lot of people are going to be interested in that as well. Any thoughts on that, Ashley? Actually, I know everybody on your team is in charge of raising capital. I know.
So many people are raising capital through social media these days. Yeah. I met with a group down in Houston that they raised on their last raise. They raised over 65% of their entire equity from social media from people they didn't even know. So there are a lot of different opportunities through Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook. I don't know if people are using Clubhouse as much as they were before, but I know a lot of people were also doing it through Clubhouse. Mm-hmm. Social media, capital raising via social media is the future. That is how people will continue to raise capital for these big deals.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we're going to do at Premier Law Group is we're going to make sure that you stay out of trouble while you do that. So before you go out and shout it from the rooftops or shout it on your Facebook page or your Instagram reels, please make sure that you've checked with your securities lawyer. If it's not us, then whomever, make sure that you're saying all the things you're supposed to be saying, and not saying, more importantly, not saying what you're not supposed to be saying. So we'll talk more about that next week. Ashley, anything else you want to impart while we've got all these lovely people here today? I know you've already given us some wonderful wisdom. I'm so grateful to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we have a question here. What channels are you using to market your apartments? With respect to how we're marketing our apartments, we have a distribution list that we are constantly getting from people who sign up on our website or through our Instagram, LinkedIn, all those social media channels that I just mentioned. And we do offerings for anyone who is on those lists. So we continue to do offerings through a Zoom. We go through the entire offering, everything from the team, the market, the opportunity, next steps, our safeguards we've put in place, the expectation as an investor. We really like to walk through every single component of the investment. So it's a pretty lengthy presentation. By and large, people are really in favor to the transparency. There are some people who are like, can you shorten this? Can I get all this information in just 5 minutes? But we're very transparent people. We really like to make sure that you have all of your questions answered for you, or a resource in which you can reference back to get those answers. We do a bit of paid marketing, but as Bethany just mentioned, we clear everything through Bethany before we post on social media. Remember that social media is fantastic, but it's also a digital copy of what you did right and what you did wrong. So having Bethany search or review everything we post to make sure we're staying compliant, it has been hugely beneficial to us as we continue to offer different investment opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And she was, sorry, meant for getting more tenants, apartments.
Oh, okay.
Versus.
Okay.
Although still really good information. So you guys got a bonus.
Okay. So in terms of how we are marketing, we are also using social media, surprisingly, but we are using social media. It really depends on the market. So this is speaking to, I think this is a prime example of the difference between how we operate and maybe how some other people operate. And I know some people operate like us. I'm not trying to say that there's no one who operates like us. I know there are, but the way in which we operate is we continually assess by each market what marketing strategies are working and what marketing strategies aren't working. So I'll give you an example. We had a property in Amarillo, Texas, and we went into the market and we said, okay, we're going to go into we're going to have one of the top listings at apartments.com. We're going to be on rent.com. We're going to advertise through Craigslist. We're going to do the normal marketing that we do, the normal package. Well, at the end of the day, we actually figured out very, very quickly that the only thing that we needed to spend money on in that market wasn't apartments.com. So that saved us about $2,000 a month from the placement that we were, paying for, the platinum package or whatever they call it. We didn't need to advertise on Craigslist. So while Craigslist is free, there are services that post for you that have figured out the algorithm of Craigslist. So you can post multiple times because, as you know, if you search Craigslist, you probably only search the first page when results come up. So we didn't have to pay for the Craigslist. We didn't have to pay for Facebook paid sponsorship ads. But what we did pay for and see the best ROI was Google AdWords, SEO and Google AdWords, Google Analytics. That had the highest yield in that market, not apartments.com, not rent.com. In fact, we were getting really bad leads through those sources, but we were spending the most amount of money with those resources. So we do an analysis for every property. on about a quarterly basis of a macro level to see if we're spending in the correct areas. On a month-by-month basis, there are a lot of seasonality trends that you can't really see when you look at it at that micro of a level. But when you look at it on a quarterly 6-month basis, you can start to identify trends at where you're marketing for your tenants. We also do guerrilla type marketing. We might go to an event and put flyers on a car. We partner with different local communities. So we'll run humane, a pet humane drive, adoption event, or we'll do a school supply drive or a food drive. We partnered with a women's charity that provides clothing to women looking to go into an interview. So we did a drive for women's professional clothing. We really like to hold one large community event per month, so our property becomes the beacon of the community. So not just to our residents, but the community at large. And we find that then people tend to recommend our community, and there's an awareness about our community. So we work with different government agencies, like for example, the local police department, fire department, EMT. We're really tapped into our markets. So that's another way in which we can market. We offer referral programs, so we do that as well. But we really try to be creative on the strategies we're deploying, and we're not past trying everything. So we really like to drill down to see what's working, what isn't working, and make note of that for that particular property. So we don't just continue to throw dollars at something that is not having a high ROI.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And, I almost forgot to mention, so I'm glad there was another, moment, a question for me to think for a second, because I want everyone to get excited, because in April, we're going to start our panel, and our inaugural panel is going to include Ashley. We're going to have a conversation with Ashley Wilson, with Maureen Miles, and with Kathy Fetke coming up in April. So we will give you some information about that. But if anybody has specific questions they really want us to cover on a panel discussion, please send those to us in an email, and I will be happy to take that under advisement and talk to them about it. And we're really excited to bring that to everybody as well. And yes, we are recording this, so I will send out a recording to everybody of this meeting as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Ashley, thank you again. I cannot thank you enough for coming on and joining. It's always hard trying to fill in. Oh, go, please.
There's one more question here that's in the from Henry Munez. So he asked, what are the key benchmarks you monitor during the whole time of your property? This is an excellent question. Obviously, my number one focus is maximizing our investors' returns. So that by and large is my number one focus, our team's number one focus. So the way in which we do that is obviously to create an incredible community that people want to spend top dollars for to be on that community. And I'm just giving you kind of a peek behind the curtain on some of the things we do, but we do a whole host of additional events and really try to create a safe and enjoyable community for people to live at. In terms of the metrics that we look at, from an investor standpoint, I know what metrics that the investors are looking at. And the thing that obviously concerns them the most is, are we hitting our target projections in terms of the pro forma projections we have? So that starts off with the cash flow that they're expected to receive on a quarterly basis. That also encompasses the NOI that we are achieving on the property. And the reason NOI, just for anyone who's not familiar with multifamily real estate, there are three ways in which multifamily is evaluated, the most common being the NOI. So the NOI is directly correlated to your sale price based off the cap rate. So it's something we focus on very heavily because it's also something we focus on in terms of whether or not we're going to exit sooner versus later and be in a position to exit sooner versus later. Right now, if someone was just going about focusing on their business plan as opposed to what the market is providing for us in today's economy with the compression of cap rates, they may miss out on the opportunity to exit early and return the capital back to their investors at a higher rate. At the end of the day, the most important thing you can do for your investors is provide a very strong return in a very prompt manner. And the reason being is because there are multiple return metrics in which an investor pays attention to. There are metrics, for example, the multiplier, the average annual return, cash on cash, and internal rate of return. Most people historically have used internal rate of return because internal rate of return takes into consideration this component of time. When you look at the analogy of winning the lottery and you can have a one lump sum or you can be paid out on a weekly basis, people who are not typically investor savvy say, oh, I'd rather take out the annuity. I'd rather get paid on a weekly basis because it sounds like it's more money because the total amount is larger. But if you actually get the one lump sum sooner, you can start having those dollars go to work for you. Savvy investors realize that. Investors that gravitate to multifamily, to syndication, especially to 506C type investment opportunities when they're accredited investment offerings, they typically know that because they know the rule of 72. The rule of 72 always speaks about the ability to return your initial investment, how much time it takes to return your initial investment with a fixed interest rate. So if you're able to return capital sooner to your investors and give them a strong return, they can then take that investment and reinvest it and continue to reinvest it. And that's how people grow wealth. So if you're able to provide that opportunity through focusing on building out the NOI, your investors will be very happy. How do you build out the NOI? Well, you have to look at the components of what the NOI is, and those are metrics we look at as well. So NOI is based off of our income, so our rental income, our other income, and our expenses. We have metrics that we review on a quarterly basis with our investors, and we go through month by month showing what we've projected versus what we've actually achieved for all of those metrics, because they are all important to us. Of course, the NOI, at the end of the day, if your NOA is strong and you're off on your income by a little bit, you're off on your rental income by a little bit, your other income a little bit, but you've greatly reduced your expenses, you might still be able to hit that target NOI. Those are little levers that you can pull and tweak, but make sure your NOI continues to grow. Make sure you continue to hit your cash flow metrics in terms of what your investors expect for returns. With respect to items that fall below the line in the industry, so below the net operating income calculation, those are factors such as entity expenses. So when the general partnership goes down to the property, checks on the property, filing of taxes. So, when you get your K1, that comes at an expense. And then also to your capital expenses, making sure that whatever you are deploying in capital expense, there either takes care of an issue on the property that needs to be handled because it goes along with the property being able to continue its general operations, or in terms of safety, or alternatively in terms of an ROI. So if you're investing a certain amount of capital, you want to make sure that you are increasing your return back. There are a lot of people who think that if you just continue to invest CapEx and grow your income, then that is executing the strategy. I do not believe in that principle. I believe in the principle of increasing your equity. So however you can increase your equity on the property, that is the best way in which you can maximize the returns and maximize the investment for everyone. So I hope that's answered the question. We obviously focus on occupancy. I'm not trying to say that we don't focus on occupancy. We don't focus on making sure that our rents are aligned with market rents. We look at concessions. We look at vacancy exposure in terms of when renewals are. So we have a lease expiration management system. So we don't have a high vacancy exposure during the winter months over December through January. We look at all of these things to stagger it out, make sure that we get that on board when we take over a property and we reposition it. So the first year is the most challenging, getting all those things in order, but long-term, then we're able to really execute on the property and we're able to deliver to our investors. We come up with a plan at the beginning, but I can tell you that that is not what we are stuck to. What we are stuck to is maximizing our return for our investors. That is the only thing we care about. So if we tell you it's going to be a 5-year hold, but it's better for us to exit in year 2 for our investors, we're exiting in year 2. That's the only thing that matters to us. And our metrics, by the way, Jay will also confirm this. We are so committed to our investors are the #1 focus. I know a lot of different organizations, they're very focused on, we want to have 1,000 units by this date. We want 500, million assets under management by this date. Our goals internally are based on how much we return to our investors. If our investors are #1, our goals should be aligned with what we believe in, which is our investors. So our internal metrics this year is we want to return $1 million to our investors this year. So that's how we focus our company. And that's how we look for different investment opportunities is we look and analyze, will this investment opportunity help us get to our goal of returning capital to our investors and building out our investors' wealth?
Awesome. Great question, Henry, and gold. Ashley, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Pack it in a little bit of extra gold at the end. I appreciate that so much. Hopefully I didn't miss anybody else's questions. Thank you for catching that. Any other final parting words that you want to hand out? God, this is great. I know Mauricio's going to cut this up and probably be getting all kinds of leverage on this. So, and we'll send out the recording too. Thank you so much. We just got one more question here. Let's see. Most important thing you can do, the rule of 72. I think she's just reiterating what you said, right? Most important thing you can do is provide a very strong return and early return to your investors. Rule of 72, how much time it takes to return investment money. Yes, thank you. Awesome. Well, thank you, Ashley. I really, really appreciate you. Always good to talk to you. And I look forward to doing this again in April with our panel. And thank you everyone for joining us. And hopefully we'll see you here again next week when we talk about advertising on social media. Thanks. Have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.